My name is Sienna Drayton, and I am 34 years old. I am the CEO of Nexaris Technologies, a technology startup that has developed into a mid-sized firm with over 220 people. But my route to achievement was not paved with family blessings. Quite the reverse. Growing up in Chicago, I was always the odd one out. My parents, Edward and Helena, made it quite apparent that my younger brother Adrian was the golden child. Adrian, 3 years my junior, had it all. The newest toys, the best opportunities, and most importantly, their undivided attention and adoration. From a young age, I learned to be self-sufficient. My parents attended all of Adrian's Little League games and school productions, but they were rarely present for my academic competitions or piano recitals. "We're busy with Adrian's event" was the most prevalent sentence I heard. When it came time for college, the difference was much more pronounced. "We've been saving for Adrian's education since he was born," my father told me when I inquired about financial assistance. "He plans to be a doctor or a lawyer eventually." "Sienna, you've always been independent." I finished with honors in computer science and business administration, having worked 3 part-time jobs and taken a full academic load at State University. Meanwhile, Adrian drank his way through freshman year at a costly private institution, soon dropped out, and then persuaded our parents to pay his gap year, which suddenly turned into 3 years of finding himself while traveling through Europe and Asia on their dime. After college, I landed an entry-level position at a small tech firm. The pay was minimal, but the experience was invaluable. I lived in a tiny studio, worked 60-hour weeks, and poured every spare minute into developing my skills and building side projects. While Adrian posted exotic vacation photos, I was coding until 3 a.m., determined to create something meaningful. My breakthrough came 5 years ago. I developed a revolutionary AI-powered customer relationship management system, pitched it to countless investors, faced rejection after rejection, but eventually secured enough funding to launch Nexaris Technologies. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked around the clock and poured everything I had into making the company succeed. By year 3, our software had gained traction. Major companies began adopting our platform and revenue flowed in, and we expanded, moved into a proper office, and I finally started paying myself a reasonable salary. There were times when I thought we wouldn't make it because funding was low and the product wasn't quite there, but I persisted. This year, Nexaris Technologies became a major player in the tech industry, valued at over $220 million. Throughout this journey, my communication with my family dwindled to occasional holiday phone calls. My parents never asked about my company, and when I tried to share my successes, they'd quickly change the subject to Adrian's latest venture, which inevitably failed by the time they told me about it. Adrian eventually returned to the United States and, with our parents' connections, landed a job at a marketing firm. He did the bare minimum, but somehow always received praise from our parents. "Adrian is really finding his way in the corporate world," my mother would say, completely ignoring the fact that I was running my own wildly successful business. In December, 3 weeks before Christmas, everything came to a head. I was sitting in my corner office, overlooking the Seattle skyline, reviewing year-end reports, when my phone rang. It was my mother, an unusual occurrence on a Tuesday afternoon. "Sienna, dear," she said in that overly sweet voice she only used when she wanted something. "I'm calling about Christmas this year." In recent years, I'd received a text message invitation at most, usually just days before, but a phone call 3 weeks in advance was unprecedented. "We're having everyone over on Christmas Eve," she continued. "It would be lovely if you could join us." A warmth spread through my chest. Despite everything, I still craved my family's acceptance. Perhaps things were changing. "That sounds nice, Mom," I said, trying to keep optimism out of my voice. "I think I can make it." "Wonderful," she exclaimed. "Oh, and Adrian is bringing his new girlfriend, Madison Vance. She works at Hargrove and Partners, a famous consulting business. Her father is a partner there." And there it was, the real reason for the call. "She's really fantastic," my mother continued, oblivious to my silence. "Harvard Business School, fast-tracked to junior partner. Adrian met her at a charity gala. Everyone is so impressed by her. Your father informs everyone that his son is dating a Harvard graduate." Can you imagine the Drayton family ascending in the world? I took a deep breath. Mom, did I mention that Nexaris was featured in Forbes last month? We plan to extend into Europe next year. Oh, that's nice, dear, she said. Anyway, Madison comes from a very good family. Her mother serves on the board of the symphony orchestra and they have a summer house in the Hamptons. Adrian says they may spend New Year's there. Isn't this exciting? I bit my tongue. Very exciting. Listen, Mom, I need to get back to work. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Of course, dear. We'll see you at Christmas. Wear something nice, will you? None of those business suits. Madison is very fashion-forward. After we hung up, I stared at my phone. My mother's behavior shouldn't have surprised me. But somehow, it still hurt. I shook it off and returned to work, trying not to think about the upcoming holiday. A week before Christmas, I was finishing my travel preparations when my phone rang again, this time from my father. He rarely called me, so I answered instantly, alarmed. Sienna, he said gruffly and without greeting. Dad, is everything all right? I'm calling about Christmas, he stated. Your mother and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you don't come this year. I sat in startled stillness, my hand clutching the phone. Adrian's girlfriend comes from a good family, he added firmly. We don't want anything to complicate things. Complicate things? I repeated, scarcely audible. What does that mean? You understand what I mean. Sienna, Madison is wealthy and successful. Her family has ties. We need to show her that our family is respectable. But I am not? The words came out sharper than I intended. Don't twist my words, he yelled. Your brother has an opportunity for a good future here. The last thing we need is you bringing in your alternative lifestyle. My alternative lifestyle? I was completely confused. Dad, I'm the CEO of a technology company. What exactly are you talking about? All that independent woman stuff, the career obsession, the way you always have to one-up your brother with your so-called success. So-called success. The word struck me like a physical blow. You've always been difficult, Sienna, he said when I didn't respond. You've always had to do things your own way, never mind how it affects the family. Can you think about someone else for a moment? Think about your brother's future. I sat there with the phone pressed against my ear as my father shattered every remaining idea I still had about my place in the family. I wasn't being excluded from Christmas because of something I had done. I was being excluded because of who I was. Accomplished, independent, and unwilling to pretend I was less than I was. I understand, I finally said, my voice firm despite the tears threatening to fall. Enjoy your Christmas. Good, he replied, sounding relieved that I wasn't arguing. Your mother will call you after the holidays. After hanging up, I sat motionless at my desk, staring out at the Seattle skyline as the winter sun disappeared early, casting long shadows across the city. I had built this company, this career, this life, all on my own. Without their help, without their support, and somehow it still wasn't enough to earn a place at their Christmas table. For the first time in years, I let myself cry over my family's rejection. Deep, painful sobs that left me struggling for breath. I cried for the little girl who had never been enough, the teenager who worked herself to exhaustion trying to earn approval that would never come, and the woman who, despite everything, still wanted her parents to love her. When the tears finally stopped, I wiped my face, straightened my shoulders, and went back to work. If I wasn't welcome at my parents' house for Christmas, I would create my own celebration. It was my first Christmas alone, and the silence felt unbearable. From my rooftop apartment in Seattle, I could see the Space Needle glowing with holiday lights. I had decorated a modest tree and hung a few ornaments. Then Callista, my executive assistant, sent me a message. Merry Christmas, Sienna. Remember, my mom's legendary eggnog is waiting if you change your mind. Callista had been horrified when she found out I planned to spend Christmas alone and immediately invited me. I politely declined. I didn't want to intrude. Before I could answer, another message appeared. This one from Olivia, my best friend since college. Merry Christmas, Sienna, Dorian, and the kids want to know when Auntie Sienna is coming over. The ham is in the oven, and there's a glass of wine with your name on it. Please tell me you're not spending Christmas alone in your sterile apartment. I smiled despite myself, because Olivia knew me too well. I stared at my phone for a long moment before finally making a decision. "Give me an hour," I texted Olivia back. "I'll bring dessert." I quickly showered and got dressed, then drove to the only bakery still open to pick up a chocolate cake. As I pulled into Olivia's suburban driveway, the front door flew open, and her 7-year-old twins, Ella and Noah, ran outside to greet me, still wearing their Christmas pajamas. "Auntie Sienna, you came," Ella squealed. "We thought you weren't coming," Noah said while grabbing the cake box. "Mom said you were working." "I finished early," I lied, following them inside. Olivia's house was the complete opposite of my minimalist apartment. Every surface was covered in Christmas decorations. The air smelled like cinnamon and roasted ham, and soft Christmas music played in the background. Olivia appeared from the kitchen. "You came," she said, sounding relieved, and immediately pulled me into a hug. "I'm so glad." Her husband, Dorian, stepped out behind her, carrying their 2-year-old daughter, Ava, on his hip. "About time you showed up, Sienna," he said. Olivia's checked her phone every 5 minutes. I was instantly surrounded by the warmth of Olivia's family. We ate an amazing dinner, opened presents. Olivia always had gifts for me, played board games with the kids, talked, laughed beside the fireplace, and something slowly started sinking in. No one asked about my work. No one asked about my accomplishments. No one compared me to Adrian. I wasn't expected to prove anything. I wasn't expected to earn my place. I was simply Sienna, someone they wanted there, someone they loved. Later that evening, while helping Olivia clean the kitchen, I quietly said, "Thank you for today. I needed this more than I realized." Olivia squeezed my shoulder. "Your family is complicated, Sienna, but you'll always have a place here." Family. The word somehow warmed me and hurt me at the same time. When I got back to my apartment that night, there was a new message waiting from Adrian. It included a photo. My parents, Adrian, and a beautiful woman I assumed was Madison, all standing in front of the same Christmas tree I remembered from childhood. Same ornaments, same star on top, same smiles. The message underneath read, "Merry Christmas." Wish you could have been here, but Madison's family joined us too, and things were a little crowded. Maybe next year. My childhood home had 5 bedrooms, a huge dining room, and more than enough space. It had never been about space. I stared at the picture for a long time. My father looked proud with his arm around Adrian. My mother looked absolutely thrilled standing beside Madison. They looked like the perfect family. And there was no place for me in the picture. Then something inside me shifted. A door quietly closed, and another one opened. If my family couldn't see my value, I would stop trying to earn their approval, and I would focus all of my energy on the one thing that had never betrayed me: work. I worked more during the week between Christmas and New Year's than I had in years. My team was on vacation, which meant the office was silent. I refined our 5-year expansion plan, started conversations with potential European partners, created an entirely new marketing strategy. When Callista returned after the holidays, she looked around my office and frowned. "Did you work through the entire break?" she asked. Concern filled her voice. "I had a breakthrough," I said without looking up. "I think this is going to be our biggest year yet." In the 3 months that followed, Nexaris Technologies signed 2 major contracts with Fortune 500 companies, finalized our European expansion plans, and started developing a new AI product that promised to completely reshape the industry. During that time, I barely thought about my family. My parents never called after Christmas, and I made no effort to reach out. Adrian occasionally texted me updates about Madison, but I replied with short, polite responses that revealed absolutely nothing about my own life. Meanwhile, the company continued to thrive. As March approached, I was completely absorbed in preparing for our biggest expansion yet. We were moving into a larger office space in downtown Seattle, hiring dozens of new employees across multiple departments, and Nexaris Technologies was no longer just a startup. It had become a major player in the industry. With me at the helm. "Sienna, do you have a minute?" Our HR director, Elaine Price, appeared in my office one afternoon in mid-March. "Of course, Elaine. What's up?" Elaine stepped inside and quietly closed the door behind her. She was holding a folder and wearing an expression somewhere between concern and amusement. "We've received over 300 applications for the senior project manager positions," she said as she sat down. The hiring team narrowed it down to around 20 candidates for first-round interviews. That's great, I said, wondering why this couldn't have been sent in an email. Are you seeing strong candidates? For the most part, yes, she said. But there's one application I thought you should see. She slid the folder across my desk. I looked down, then froze. Adrian Drayton. My brother's resume sat right in front of me. I immediately started scanning it. Inflated job titles, vague accomplishments, current position, executive marketing strategist. From what I knew, Adrian was at best a mid-level marketing associate. Did you know he was applying? Elaine asked carefully. She was one of the very few people at the company who knew anything about my family. No, I said quietly, still staring at the page. I had no idea. He was very confident during the phone screening, Elaine continued with a small laugh. Actually, he was rather condescending to Sarah in HR. He assumed she was a secretary and asked to speak with someone who actually made decisions. I closed my eyes. That sounded exactly like Adrian. This position requires at least 5 years of project management experience and proficiency in 3 programming languages, Elaine continued. As you can see, his resume doesn't meet those requirements. But he requested consideration for a senior role rather than an entry-level position. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Adrian had absolutely no idea I was the CEO of Nexaris Technologies. I had always used my middle name, Victoria, in interviews and press appearances because I valued privacy. And Adrian had never shown enough interest in my career to notice. But now, by complete coincidence, or maybe because our company had suddenly become impossible to ignore, he had applied for a job at my company. What would you like to do? Elaine asked carefully. There's obviously a conflict of interest here. I sat there silently considering my options. I could reject his application immediately, which would have been justified. I could remove myself completely and allow the hiring team to decide without knowing our relationship. Or I could finally let Adrian see the truth. Not the version our parents created. The real truth. I want you to treat his application like any other candidate, I finally said. If he doesn't meet the qualifications, he shouldn't move forward. Elaine hesitated. On paper, he's not qualified, she admitted. But he mentioned some contacts with potential clients, and the hiring team thought those relationships could be valuable. So despite the lack of technical qualifications, they advanced him to the next round. Connections. Of course. Adrian had spent his entire life getting ahead because of who he knew, instead of what he could actually do. When is his interview? I asked. Tomorrow at 2. I sat quietly for a few seconds. Then I made a decision. I won't be directly involved in the hiring process. That would be unethical. But I'd like to observe the interview. Elaine raised an eyebrow. Observe? Please introduce me only as a senior board member. Don't mention my title. Elaine stared at me for a moment, then slowly nodded. We can do that. The panel won't mention your name or position. After she left, I sat there staring down at Adrian's resume. My emotions were all over the place. Part of me felt guilty, because from the outside, it might have looked like a setup. But another part of me, the part of me that had spent years being ignored and dismissed, wanted Adrian to finally see me for who I really was. Not just his overlooked sister. Not just the person everyone in our family pushed aside, but someone who had built something meaningful, someone successful, someone real. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the interview in my mind. Professional, detached, fair. I wouldn't let our history influence my judgment. But I also wasn't going to shrink myself anymore. Not this time. For once, Adrian would finally see me clearly, without our parents standing in between us. The next morning, I dressed more carefully than usual. A tailored navy suit, my hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. Then I headed toward the conference room where interviews were taking place. I took my seat at the far end of the room with the other observers, reviewed Adrian's resume one more time, prepared several technical questions that would challenge him, but not unfairly. At exactly 2 p.m., Elaine walked into the room with Adrian beside her, and suddenly my breath caught. I hadn't seen my brother in person in over a year. He looked older, more polished, more confident, expensive suit, perfect smile. He carried himself like someone who had never once been told he wasn't enough. And for a second, just 1 second, I felt like that little girl all over again, standing on the sidelines, watching my parents give all their attention to their golden child. But then I looked around the room, looked at the company I built, the office, the people, the position I had earned, and I straightened my shoulders, ready for whatever happened next. The Nexaris Technologies headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a glass skyscraper in downtown Seattle. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows with an incredible view of the city and the water beyond. Modern artwork lined the walls. And judging by Adrian's expression as he walked inside, the room had already done its job. Elaine introduced the interview panel, Sarah from HR, Lucian, our technical director, Thalia, our senior project manager. Then she gestured toward the observer section where I sat with 2 other executives. "We also have members of our leadership team observing today," Elaine said calmly. "They'll be sitting in on several interviews to ensure consistency throughout the hiring process." Adrian barely looked toward us. His attention stayed fixed on the panel. He smiled confidently while taking his seat and adjusted his tie in a movement I immediately recognized from childhood. He always did that when he wanted to impress people. "Thank you for this opportunity," he said. "I've been following Nexaris Technologies' growth, and I'm excited about the possibility of bringing my expertise to your team." Adrian had absolutely no idea what Nexaris Technologies actually did beyond some broad understanding of tech company. If he had done even basic research, he would have discovered my connection immediately. Lucian started with a standard question. "Can you tell us about your experience managing complex technical projects?" Adrian launched into a polished answer about a marketing campaign from his current company. I coordinated multiple departments, managed a substantial budget, and delivered results beyond expectations. He leaned back slightly afterward, almost like he expected applause. "What project management methods did you use?" Lucian asked. Adrian paused. "I believe in a flexible approach that adapts to each project's needs," he answered. "I don't like being constrained by rigid methodologies." Thalia leaned forward. "Could you explain how you would organize a Kanban board for a software development project?" I saw it immediately. The confidence shifted, just slightly. "Well, I would delegate that to technical team members," Adrian responded. "My strength is strategy, big picture thinking, not day-to-day technical details." The interview continued like that. Technical questions, vague answers, strategic buzzwords, confident smiles. And every time the questions became more specific, Adrian became more uncomfortable. Then eventually he smiled and waved his hand dismissively. "Let's be honest," he said. "People like me aren't hired because of coding skills. People like me are hired because we know how to lead, motivate, and connect with the right people. I have relationships with major corporations that could become valuable clients for Nexaris." Sarah, who had remained mostly quiet, finally spoke. "Our senior project managers are expected to have both leadership skills and technical expertise. They need to fully understand our products in order to manage development effectively." Adrian waved his hand again. "That's what technical assistants are for. In my experience, successful projects are led by people who understand business." No offense, but self-made people without the right backgrounds often miss the big picture because they're too focused on technical details. The room went completely still. Everyone sitting there knew Nexaris Technologies had been built entirely by self-made people. Entirely. Elaine's expression changed slightly. "Tell us about a time you faced a major challenge and how you overcame it," Lucian asked carefully. Adrian immediately launched into another story. "I once saved an entire marketing campaign after a vendor failed at the last second. I spent the whole weekend making hundreds of calls and finding a replacement. My boss said he'd never seen anything like it. I pressed my lips together because I knew that story. I knew it very well. Because Adrian hadn't saved anything. His assistant had worked through the weekend. Adrian had simply taken credit, and I knew because that same assistant later interviewed at Nexaris Technologies and told us what actually happened. As technical questions continued, Adrian became visibly frustrated. He checked his watch, shifted in his chair, looked irritated. "I think we're getting too caught up in technical details," he finally said. "Like I've already explained, my value comes from vision and connections. I'm currently being considered for multiple senior positions elsewhere. I'd love to focus on how my unique skills can help Nixaris grow. Elaine exchanged a glance with the panel, then nodded. We're actually nearing the end of our scheduled time, she said. But before we finish, our CEO, who makes final decisions on all senior hires, would like to ask a few questions. Adrian straightened immediately. Alert. Interested. Meeting the CEO clearly hadn't been listed on the interview schedule. Of course, he said, adjusting his tie one more time. I'd be happy to. Elaine turned toward the observer section. Sienna, would you like to take over? I stood, then slowly walked toward the front of the room, and I watched Adrian's face change. First confusion, then recognition, then disbelief, and finally, fear. Hello, Adrian, I said quietly, extending my hand. It's been a while. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Slowly he stood, then shook my hand. His palm felt cold. You're the CEO? He finally whispered. Sienna Victoria Drayton, founder and CEO of Nixaris Technologies, I said calmly as I sat directly across from him. I removed myself from the initial hiring process for obvious reasons. But I make the final decisions regarding senior hires. Adrian's face had completely lost color. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for some explanation, looking for anything. But there wasn't one. For once, there wasn't anyone there to save him. I have a few questions, I continued professionally, opening his resume folder. You listed your current position as Executive Marketing Strategist. However, when I contacted Hargrove Partners last week regarding a possible collaboration, your supervisor referred to you as a marketing associate. Can you explain the difference? Adrian's eyes widened. I handle executive-level projects, he stammered. It's more of a functional title. Not an official one, I nodded, made a note. I see. Then turned another page. You also listed Python and Java among your skills. Could you briefly explain how you would use either language for an API integration? Adrian tugged at his collar. I oversee teams that handle those things. Like I mentioned earlier, I focus on strategy, not coding. I see, I repeated calmly. Then I closed the folder. One final question. You mentioned connections that could bring valuable business opportunities to Nixaris. Can you explain who those contacts are and how those relationships created measurable business results in your current position? Adrian shifted uncomfortably. Well, Madison's father, my girlfriend's father. He's a partner at a consulting firm, and my father knows several business owners in Chicago who... Then his voice slowly faded, because even he heard it. Even he realized how weak it sounded. The connections he had bragged about weren't even his. They were borrowed. Secondhand, built through other people, not through him. Thank you for your time today, Adrian, I said. Then I stood. Our HR team will contact you regarding next steps. I offered my hand again. Still, completely professional, even though emotions were crashing into each other beneath the surface. Adrian shook it, still looking stunned. Thank you, he said quietly. Elaine stood and walked him toward the door. Just before leaving, Adrian turned and looked back at me. Embarrassment. Confusion, shock, and something else. Something I couldn't quite identify. Maybe realization. Maybe for the first time in his life, he was finally seeing me clearly. The room stayed quiet after the door closed. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Then Lucian let out a low whistle. Well, he said slowly, that was unexpected. He looked over at me. I'm assuming the two of you know each other? He's my brother, I said simply while gathering my notes. That's why I removed myself from the initial screening process. Please evaluate his application using our standard criteria and ignore our relationship entirely. Everyone nodded, but I could see the questions in their expressions. I excused myself and headed back to my office, closing the door behind me, locking it. Only then did I finally allow myself to process what had just happened. I hadn't planned to humiliate Adrian. I truly hadn't. But I also hadn't protected him from the consequences of his own arrogance. For the first time in his life, he had been judged completely on his own merit. Without our parents influencing the outcome, without someone stepping in, without someone smoothing the path ahead of him. And strangely, I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel revenge, only closure. A strange, quiet kind of closure. For years I had lived in the shadows of my family's dismissal, built something they never cared enough to notice. And now Adrian knew. Now he had seen it. Whether anything would actually change, I had no idea. I had barely sat down when my office phone rang. It was Elaine. "Sienna," she said carefully, "your brother is still here." I closed my eyes. Of course he was. "He's demanding to speak with you." She paused. "And he's on the phone with someone." "I think it's your father." I leaned back slowly, because somehow I already knew this wasn't over. It never was. "Send him in," I said. "And Elaine?" "Thank you for handling everything professionally." She laughed softly. "That's what we do here. We handle things professionally." The slight emphasis in her voice almost made me smile. Almost. Because seconds later, the office door flew open. Adrian stormed inside without knocking. His face was red, humiliation, anger, shock, everything at once. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. He slammed the door behind him harder than necessary. I stayed seated, kept my voice calm, professional. "That was a job interview, Adrian. For a position you applied for. You made me look like an idiot," he shouted. "You set me up." "I did no such thing," I replied calmly. "You applied to my company without doing basic research. If you had, you would have known I was CEO. Your lack of preparation isn't my fault." He stared at me, completely stunned. How was I supposed to know? "You never talk about your work." I looked at him quietly, then laughed once, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. I've tried talking about my work for years. No one in our family ever cared enough to listen. A simple search of Nexaris Technologies' CEO would have shown my name and photo. Adrian ran his hand through his hair, exactly like our father always did. "This is just like you, Sienna. Always trying to make me look bad. Always trying to prove you're better." I took a slow breath, stayed calm. "Adrian, I removed myself from the hiring process specifically to avoid conflicts. The only reason you reached the interview stage was because the hiring team advanced you. I only participated at the end, exactly as I do for every senior position. But you asked impossible technical questions. You knew I couldn't answer them. Those were standard questions. Every candidate for that position gets technical questions. That's why the job description listed required skills and qualifications." Adrian suddenly sat down, and for the first time since entering my office, his anger started fading. "Dad's furious," he said quietly, then looked up at me. "He's on his way here." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "Dad's coming here?" I asked. "To my office?" Adrian avoided my eyes. I called him after the interview. He and Mom were already in Seattle. They've been visiting Madison's parents. I stared at him. My parents had never once visited. Not once, despite countless invitations, but they had flown across the country to spend time with their son's girlfriend's family. "Adrian," I said carefully, "this is my workplace. Whatever family issues we have should stay outside of it." He shrugged, part helplessness, part complete disregard for my boundaries. "Too late. They're probably already downstairs." Right on cue, my phone rang. Reception. "Miss Drayton, your parents are here and requesting to see you." I closed my eyes for a second, centered myself, then answered, "Send them up." I paused. "And could you ask Elaine and Callista to stop by in about 10 minutes? Witnesses felt like a smart idea. While we waited, Adrian's phone buzzed. He looked down and smirked. "Madison's father might be interested in investing in your little company." See? That's what connections can do. Before I could respond, the door opened. My father walked in first, Edward. His face wore the same expression I remembered from childhood lectures and punishments. My mother followed behind him. Helena's eyes immediately moved around my office. The huge windows, the city view, the awards on the walls, the office itself. "Sienna," my father started immediately, "what exactly is all this? You embarrassed your brother during a job interview. Was this revenge?" I slowly stood, kept my expression neutral. "Professional. Hello, Dad. Mom. Please sit down. This doesn't need to become confrontational." "Don't tell me what this needs to be," my father snapped. "Adrian said you ambushed him, asked impossible questions, made him look incompetent." "I did no such thing," I replied quietly. "Adrian applied for a senior position at my company without realizing I was CEO. The questions were standard for every candidate." My mother finally spoke, quietly. "Your company? You're the CEO here?" She looked around again, this time more slowly. The skyline, the awards, the office, the obvious signs of success. "Yes, Mom. I founded Nexaris Technologies 6 years ago. I'm CEO and majority shareholder." For a moment, I couldn't stop a little pride from slipping into my voice, but my father waved it away instantly. That's not the point. The point is Adrian needs this job, and you can help him. That's what family does. I looked at him, then at Adrian, then back again, and suddenly something inside me finally cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, because after everything, they still somehow believed I owed Adrian something. The position Adrian applied for requires technical skills and experience he simply doesn't have, I told him. It wouldn't be fair to other candidates or to the company if I hired someone unqualified because of family connections. So you're refusing to help your own brother? My father demanded. His voice rose immediately. After everything we've done for you? Something inside me snapped at those words. What exactly have you done for me? I asked quietly, dangerously quietly. My father looked stunned. Excuse me? What exactly did you do for me, Dad? Because I seem to remember paying my own way through college. I remember working 3 jobs while Adrian attended an expensive private university. I remember building my company without help. I remember spending years trying to tell you about my work while nobody cared enough to listen. Silence. Absolute silence. We raised you, my father finally said. No, I interrupted. Even I surprised myself. You raised me, but you didn't support me. You didn't encourage me. You didn't believe in me. And a week before Christmas, my voice shook, only slightly. You called and told me not to come because Adrian was bringing Madison and you wanted to look respectable. My mother looked horrified. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened, I replied. Dad told me not to come. He said I would complicate things. Those were his exact words. I looked toward Adrian. He shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know about that, he said quietly. Of course you didn't, I said. You were too busy sending me pictures of Christmas while I sat alone. My father's face turned red. This is ridiculous. We're getting off topic. The issue here is Adrian's job. No, I interrupted him again. The issue isn't the job. The issue is that my entire life I've been treated like I mattered less. I've spent years building this company, years building something meaningful, and not one of you ever cared enough to ask about it. A knock interrupted the silence. Then the office door opened. Elaine stepped inside. Callista followed behind her, both wearing perfectly neutral expressions. You wanted us? Elaine asked. Yes, I nodded, then looked back at my parents. Mom? Dad? This is Elaine Price, our HR director. And Callista Rowan, my executive assistant. They're here to clarify company hiring policies. My father frowned immediately. This is a family matter. Actually, I said calmly, this stopped being only a family matter when Adrian applied for a position here. Our relationship doesn't change hiring standards. Elaine stepped forward. Mr. Drayton, our hiring process is structured very carefully. All candidates are evaluated according to the same standards. The job posting clearly listed the qualifications required for the senior project manager role. My father turned back toward me. You're CEO. You can make an exception. I could, I answered, but I won't, because my company's success depends on putting the right people into the right positions, and Adrian isn't qualified for a senior role. Is that it? My father demanded. You're choosing your company over your family? No, I replied, my voice steady. I'm protecting the integrity of the company I built. Then I looked at Adrian. However, we do have entry-level positions in the marketing department that may fit your background. You would need to start at the bottom. Learn the systems, build experience, work your way up. But there would absolutely be opportunities for advancement. Adrian stared at me like I had insulted him. Entry level? I've worked in marketing for 5 years. Yes, I said. Marketing, not technical project management at a technology company. Those are 2 very different things. This is unbelievable, my father snapped. You're punishing your brother because you're jealous. Because you've always needed to prove you're better than everyone else. I felt anger rise in my chest. Real anger. But I kept my voice controlled. Dad, I built a company worth over $200 million. I employ over 200 people. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. What I'm trying to build is a company based on merit and hard work, not nepotism. For the first time since entering my office, my mother finally spoke. Sienna? Her voice sounded quieter, smaller. After all these years? Can't you put your resentment aside and help your brother? Family should come first. I stared at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Interesting. Family should come first. Where was family first when I was excluded from Christmas? Where was family first when I worked 3 jobs through college? Where was family first when every accomplishment I ever had became another reason to praise Adrian instead? My mother looked down, didn't answer, because there wasn't one. After a few seconds, I spoke again, more quietly this time. I'm not refusing to help Adrian. I'm offering him a real opportunity, a fair opportunity, more than I ever received. Silence filled the office again. My father shook his head, disgust, frustration, defeat. This is pointless, he muttered. Come on, we're leaving. Adrian stood slowly, straightened his jacket, avoided looking directly at me. I wouldn't work here anyway, he muttered. I have other opportunities. As they turned toward the door, I called after him. Adrian? He stopped, didn't turn around. The offer still stands. If you change your mind, contact Elaine directly. My father guided my mother toward the door, but just before stepping out, my mother stopped, then turned. For a moment, she simply looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. Her expression shifted. Confusion, regret, recognition, something I couldn't fully understand. Then quietly she said, Your office is beautiful. You've done well for yourself. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't praise. Not exactly, but it was something, some small acknowledgement of the life I had built, and somehow that hurt almost as much as everything else. After my parents left, Elaine and Callista stayed behind. Both looked concerned. Are you okay? Callista asked quietly. I took a deep breath, then nodded. Yeah. And surprisingly, for the first time in a very long time, I actually meant it. Because standing my ground felt different than I expected. Telling the truth felt different. Not shrinking myself, not pretending, not making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. It felt freeing, like I was finally becoming the person I should have been years ago. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into work, finalizing European expansion plans, managing the transition into our new office, keeping myself busy. The confrontation with my family had been painful, but strangely it had also been clarifying. For the first time in my life, I had said everything out loud, everything, without apologizing, without minimizing my success, without making myself easier to accept. Then one Sunday afternoon, while sitting on my couch with a book and a cup of tea, my phone rang. Building security. Miss Drayton, the receptionist said, Your parents are downstairs requesting permission to come up. I sat upright immediately. My parents had never visited my apartment before. Not once. After a moment of hesitation, I finally agreed. A few minutes later, I opened the door and instantly noticed something. They looked older. Not dramatically, but enough. My father's shoulders looked heavier somehow. My mother's smile looked uncertain, nervous. Sienna, my mother said softly, thank you for letting us come. We should have called first. We just weren't sure if you'd want to see us. I stepped aside. Come in. They walked into my apartment slowly, looking around, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline, the modern furniture, the artwork. I noticed my mother's eyes scanning the room, almost like she was searching for family photos. But there weren't any. Can I get you coffee, tea? I asked. Water? No, thank you, my father said quietly, much quieter than he had been in my office. We won't stay long. We sat down, my parents on the couch, me across from them. For a while, nobody said anything. Then finally, my father cleared his throat. Adrian lost his job, straight to the point, always. The day after we visited your office. His boss found out he'd been interviewing elsewhere and fired him. I nodded slowly, not surprised. He's been looking for work, my mother added. Nothing's worked out. Then she hesitated, and Madison ended things last week. She said she needed to focus on her career. I felt a wave of sympathy. Losing a relationship and a job in the same week, that would break almost anyone. I'm sorry, I said honestly. How's he doing? My parents exchanged a look. He's staying with us right now, my mother said quietly. He's having a difficult time. I waited, because I knew there was more. And eventually, my father spoke. Sienna, about Christmas. He looked down, then away, then finally back at me. And for the first time in my entire life, my father looked uncomfortable. What your father is trying to say, my mother began carefully, is that we've been thinking. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. and we've realized some things." "Realized what?" I asked calmly. My mother swallowed. "That we were unfair to you for a long time. We didn't see it. Or maybe," she hesitated, "maybe we didn't want to see it." Silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Then finally my father exhaled. "We ignored how hard you worked. We ignored what you accomplished. And what happened at Christmas?" He stopped, like even saying it was difficult. "What happened at Christmas was cruel." I stared at him, because in my entire life I couldn't remember my father admitting he was wrong. Not once. "Why now?" I asked quietly. "Why are you telling me this now?" Then I looked directly at him. "Is this because you want me to hire Adrian?" My father looked embarrassed, actually embarrassed. "Partly," he admitted. The honesty surprised me. "But not only because of that. After seeing your office, seeing your company, we realized something. We realized we didn't actually know you anymore. Maybe we never really did." My mother looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine sadness in her expression. "We spent so much time focusing on Adrian, on what we wanted for him, that we never paid attention to what you were building. And we should have." Her eyes started watering. "We should have been proud of you. We should have supported you." I sat there quietly, not because I didn't know what to say, because I honestly didn't know what I felt. Validation, relief, anger, hurt, hope, everything at once. Finally, I spoke. "It's not too late." Both of them looked up immediately. "If you actually want a relationship with me, then things have to be different. I'm not going to make myself smaller anymore. I'm not going to pretend my accomplishments don't matter, and I'm not going to apologize for who I am." My father nodded slowly. "We understand." Then after a pause, "Or at least, we're trying to." Silence settled over the room again. Then my mother looked at me carefully. "And Adrian?" I took a breath, then answered, "The offer still stands. Entry-level marketing. Like everyone else, he'll earn promotions through performance, but he'll receive a fair chance." "That's more than fair," my father said quietly. "I'll talk to him." A few moments later, my mother looked at me and asked, "How did you do it?" I blinked. "What?" "All of it. Build everything by yourself." And for the first time in my adult life, my mother asked about my work because she genuinely wanted to know. I started telling her about the early days of Nexaris Technologies, about the tiny apartment, the endless nights, the investors who said no, again and again and again. I told her about working until 3 a.m, about wondering whether I had made a terrible mistake, about watching friends build relationships and families while I built software and business plans, about the moments when I nearly gave up, and the moments that kept me going. As I talked, I noticed something changing in my parents' expressions. Not just acknowledgement, not just surprise, respect, real respect. For the first time, they weren't looking at me like I was their difficult daughter. They were looking at me like I was someone who had actually built something meaningful, someone who had created a life through hard work, not through luck, not through connections. When they finally left an hour later, nothing had been magically fixed. Years of favoritism and disappointment couldn't disappear in a single conversation. Too much had happened, too much history, too much hurt. But something had shifted. A door had opened, and for the first time in years, a different future actually felt possible. The following week, Adrian called Elaine about the entry-level marketing position. According to her, he sounded quieter, more reserved, more humble. She put him through the exact same hiring process as everyone else. Same interviews, same standards, same treatment, no special favors, no exceptions. To my surprise, he accepted the offer, even though the salary was much lower than his previous job. On his first day, Adrian showed up outside my office looking nervous. Actually nervous. I looked up from my computer as he stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course." He stepped inside and sat down. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything. Then finally, "I want to do this right. I want to actually learn, earn my place." I looked at him quietly, because I honestly couldn't remember Adrian ever saying something like that before. Then he looked down, and "I'm sorry." About Christmas, about everything, about a lot of things. I sat there silently for a moment, then finally nodded. "Show me with actions, not words. That's how trust gets rebuilt." He nodded immediately. Fair enough. As spring slowly turned into summer, small changes started happening. My mother started calling regularly, not to talk about Adrian, not to compare us, to ask about me, about work, about expansion plans, about my life. My father changed more slowly, much more slowly, but he started trying in his own way, sending me articles about technology companies, asking questions about software, asking about Nexaris. Even Adrian surprised everyone. He showed up early, stayed late, worked hard, listened, learned. He still had moments. Moments where old habits slipped through. Moments where entitlement appeared. But little by little, he was changing too. Then in July, I received another invitation, this time for my parents' anniversary dinner. No conditions, no exclusions, no mention of who would or wouldn't be there. Just family. As I confirmed I would come, I thought back over the last several months. The Christmas exclusion, the office confrontation, everything that happened afterward. We still weren't a perfect family, and honestly, we probably never would be. There was too much history, too many old habits, too many scars. But we were finding something new, something built on honesty, on truth, on respect. And maybe that was enough. Because standing up for myself hadn't destroyed my family, like I spent years fearing it would. Instead, it gave us a chance to finally become something real,